Now, some people just don't want that dick. And for lack of a better term, some people just don't want that dick.
What is sex? Who's having it? And how are they having it?
Everything is about sex.
Remember when talking about sex was taboo? Well, that ain't the case no more.
My first sex talk.
I don't hate sex, I just hate it for me.
From missionary and monogamy to polyamory and sex robots, the Big Sex Talk docuseries covers all that and then some.
How graphic do you want me to get?
I chatted with Toronto-raised sex educator and host for the Big Sex Talk, Shan Boudreau. We dive into how the conversations around sex are changing.
Hello there, lovers and friends. Let's talk about sex.
Why is sex so important to talk about?
Sex is important to talk about because it plays a massive role in our lives, whether we're sexual or not. We're born as sexual beings. We die as sexual beings. A lot happens in between, and we need some help figuring that out.
When I was 6 years old, I had a best friend, and she was like, "Do you know about sex? The man, what like the man pees with, it goes inside what we pee with." And I was like, "No."
Essentially, I want people to become more competent and thus more confident in their intimate lives in the bedroom and beyond. But as, of course, we broaden out the definition of sexuality, we realize that's not a one size fits all, which is definitely what we're told in sex education.
Well, so I think those are topics that you cover in this new series that you are narrating called The Big Sex Talk. So do you want to dive into what can we expect from this new series that you're narrating?
The Big Sex Talk, to me, is everything that sex education should strive to start being. It's real people, it's real stories, it's relatable, it's funny, it's interesting, and it's diverse. Diverse in race, diverse in gender expression, diverse in age, diverse in every capacity. Because again, sexuality and sex is not a one size fits all. It's not a monolith. So when we're having this discussion, we have to have it with multiple kinds of people who identify in various different ways. And so the Big Sex Talk really does satisfy that.
Even though I haven't seen many other dicks in my life, I just knew that that was an ugly one. Do you know what I'm saying?
It gives an opportunity to me, not just for people to hear, but to inspire really important discussions afterward. I do genuinely hope people watch this show in groups, or at least bring it back to their group chat.
Do you find the conversation around sex is changing?
Oh my gosh, yes, it's changing. It is changing for the better in so many ways. It's changing for the worse in ways that I think are actually better as well. Meaning, when I first started in this space, like 15 years ago, the question I got all the time was from women who were like, "I can't orgasm, I'm broken, what's wrong with me?" And there was no cliteracy back then, literacy around the clitoris. People didn't know what that was, or it was viewed in that Freudian way of, oh, it's the immature way of orgasming. If you actually come into your body and come into your own, you should be able to orgasm the way you see in porn, the way you see in movies. And if you can't, there's something wrong with you.
The woman feels her vagina becoming kind of slippery inside.
And now, 15 years later, there's just a knowledge that like our bodies are not designed to work the way that we see in mainstream media porn, and that's okay. And there's so many different ways to experience sexuality. There's so many different ways to connect with people. There's ways to not experience sexuality that are completely okay.
I feel about as enthusiastic about it as I feel about doing the dishes or folding laundry.
And there are beautiful communities that surround people who have those feelings. And so the conversation is so much broader. It makes my job more difficult in many ways because I used to have a copy and paste Google form that I would have. I would just say, okay, answer that question, answer that question. But now the questions are so nuanced because people are more aware and they can Google the basic stuff.
What kind of patterns are you noticing with like that time lapse, like the then and now? Are you noticing patterns in people that are very similar?
Yeah, I mean, there's basic ones that when I started this career, the orgasm gap, for example, between people with penises, people with vulvas was 3-to-1. So for every 3 orgasms a person with a penis had, a person with a vulva had 1. It's now 2-to-1. So that's like an improvement where we're seeing women's sexual liberation really start to make positive impacts on people's sex lives. And then there's also an argument that sexlessness, that the fact that Gen Z is the sexless generation is a positive thing because more people are saying no to coercion. They're saying yes to only the kinds of sex that they actually want. And they're also redefining what sex is. Not everybody is, enthusiastic. There was a line in the Big Sex Talk where it said like, some people just don't want that dick. And for lack of a better term, some people just don't want that dick. And that could be contributing to these statistics that aren't telling the full story of a generation of people who have more self-advocacy and more self-awareness.
I think there's so many unique ways to actually set your boundaries, and they don't have to be you screaming no. They can be you having some fun with it.
Obviously, with technology and the distractions and the lack of in-person connection that we're experiencing, that's also a part of the story. There's also a part of the story that is around antidepressants and the rise of younger people using that. So not to say that it's all positive, but I think that there is a lot of signs that show that the generation coming up has a lot more self-advocacy. And as a result, they're having less sex, but arguably better sex.
Just watching the trailer, I actually love the fact that the show features such a diverse population of Canadians. You hear from unexpected people who are very willing and open to talk about their sex lives, which is really interesting to me. I know, you're from Toronto, you moved to LA. Do you find the conversation is different between Canadians and Americans though, or is it the same?
I think what we see in the big sex talk is that Canada is actually a lot more progressive than you would assume, and so much more diverse in their sexual expression and ready to have the dialogue. To the point that you made, you saw people that you wouldn't think would be talking about sex being really open and enthusiastic about sharing. So
I watched a bit of the first episode, and as you mentioned, it talks about monogamy. So I think the statistic I read there, or I heard there, was we find out that 96% of Canadians follow this relationship construct of monogamy, which honestly, for me, that sounded pretty high, to be honest. We do hear about divorce rates going up. We hear about people cheating. Is monogamy not cool anymore, or is it becoming less popular?
I think it's becoming less popular, but that's not a bad thing. I think as more options open up, people realize that they have different ways of committing to people, different ethical ways of committing to people.
My marriage was broken down because we had a Catholic marriage based on the old-fashioned principle of fidelity, and I was unfaithful.
So in my parents' generation, non-monogamy wasn't necessarily even a thing unless, polygamy, which is illegal because you can't have multiple spouses. So the idea that it's okay to be honest with someone and say, I have the capacity to love multiple people. I'm a polyamorous individual, or I have the capacity to be emotionally connected to one person, but I have a strong sex drive and an appetite for new partners. So I like to be sexually open. Like, that language didn't exist before. Most people genuinely are going to be drawn to monogamy. One, because culturally, it's still the way that we watch movies. Every movie that you see is about a monogamous couple, and probably your parents and examples that you see. So it's so deeply reinforced as like the superior way to form a connection. And for a lot of people, it just feels better to them. So naturally, aside from everything else, they're just drawn to that style of connection.
With Garfield and monogamy, it works for me, and I believe it works for us, correct?
I think it does.
But now what you have with non-monogamy is a way of weeding out the people who were never going to be successful in monogamous relationships, the people who were going to end up cheating or betraying or being dishonest to some capacity or being unhappy, which is a betrayal in itself when you can't show up as a joyful, present person in a relationship. Those people can now go a different route, maybe where they can actually show up more joyfully and honestly as a partner.
I could probably
so
cheat.
You don't.
I could probably open my relationship.
Really?
I would have sex, but come home to you. But I don't think you can.
That's new information.
So let's talk about the future of sex and technology. I don't know too much about the episode, but what can we look forward to?
Well, I love the fact that you're like, what is it? And then, you mentioned that you're on dating apps. That's sex tech, right? That's a part of sex and technology. It's some form of technology that mediates our intimate life, that acts as a third party or as a matchmaker. So that could be dating apps. It could be advanced sex toys. That could be porn that is a lot more immersive now, right? Where they would have this whole section there about virtual reality porn stars and the various ways that they truly, connect with their viewer in a way that you just couldn't before when you went to those stores and got a VHS that were, behind 5 other stores. And so things are definitely changing in the realm of porn as well, too, for the benefit of technology in many ways. So I think that when we think about what sex tech is, we have to all consider that probably 90% of us are some form of digisexuals, which means we're sexual through the assistance of the digital world. And so, yeah, most of us are digisexuals. We probably just don't know it. If your vibrator has to get plugged into a USB, you arguably are a digisexual.
Is there one thing in the past 15 years that you've noticed is constant between everyone having sex, no matter how they're having sex?
Yeah, I think pleasure, because that was really great about the episode about the sexlessness, because it featured the asexual community who, is not having quote unquote sex, but is still experiencing pleasure and is still looking for connection in ways of just savoring life and enjoying the moment and feeling sensual, which is the engagement of your five senses, which can be an out of body experience, but just not necessarily rubbing up against someone else's body. So I think pleasure is the constant, and that is the goal. I often say this to people, that sex is such a unique space, or sexuality. This is a space where you get to really claim and say, like, what feels good for me? What doesn't feel good for me? And let me only focus, creating a sex life that is based on those bits of information. And of course, so much more information, which I think, again, the Big Sex Talk really helps to inform you on what you should be looking into.
Let us know what you think about the show in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe to our Narcissy channel to see more great content.